Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life, not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud at VMSPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. Oh yeah, we're also on YouTube, so the URL's really weird. Just go to YouTube and search for Virtual Memories Show, and you'll find about 50 or 60 past episodes there. Now, you can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSPod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSPod or paypal.me/VMSPod and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. Now, I got some good news carried over from last week. My local library likes the idea of hosting a regular podcast feature, so we are now going to have the maybe bi-monthly or quarterly Virtual Memories Show live at the Ringwood Public Library. Now I just need to figure out how to get guests to come out to beyond suburban New Jersey and record an episode of the show with a live audience, which sounded like a good idea when I pitched it, but now that I can actually make it happen, it sounds like a bit more of a hassle than I thought. Still, we'll make it work, and I will turn Ringwood, New Jersey into a literary cultural mecca. You'll see. You'll all see. But anyway, that's just life out here. The further you get away from New York, I guess the stranger things get. This episode sort of continues in that vein because it's part of the ongoing series of cartoonists and artists from the New Yorker magazine who have bugged out of New York. My guest this time is Arnie Levin, an artist with an absolutely amazing career and a legendary life. His cartooning's amazing, and you can search that out through newyorker.com or at art.com. Just look for Arnie Levin, and that's ARNIELEVIN, and you'll get an idea of both of the kind of warped sense of humor and the incredible line that Arnie has. But this episode's about a little more than that. Because Arnie's life is singular, to put it mildly. Now, let me get a couple of caveats out of the way, and then I'll give you a sort of bio that explains what I'm talking about. First, we did not have a table, so we had to hold the mics in hand. And Arnie got a little distracted and gesticulative. So there's some noise you'll have to deal with around the audio. I had the backup recorder, but the quality is still better with the handheld mics that we had. The other caveat is that this episode is kind of long and elliptical, and the best way I can put it is that Arnie has had an epic life, and a lot of epics get sort of digressive and messy when you try and recount them, and that's what comes out here. So the journey, it's meandering, but like I said, Arnie's led a singular, unrepeatable life, so it's worth the time to get there. In a sense, the conversation sort of overlaps with the episode from a few weeks ago with R.O. Bleckman, and Bleckman's actually an important figure in Arnie's life, as will become clear. But that's sort of part of the mission of this show, is getting these guys, and they're generally guys, in their 70s, 80s, and beyond, to sort of recapture some of what that life was like, making it as an artist and making it in the business world as an artist in New York and in that era. Anyway, here's a bio of Arnie. It's written by Richard Gere, who's a past guest of the show, in an introduction to an interview he did with Arnie that ended up becoming part of his great book, I Only Read It for the Cartoons, The New Yorker's Most Brilliantly Twisted Artists. Born in 1938, the diminutive Arnie Levin sports the shaved head, handlebar mustache, and slightly rolling gait of a badass biker. Much of his upper body is tattooed with ornate Japanese imagery by a renowned Yakuza body illustrator. And the more you learn about his life, the wider the gap between creator and creations seems to spread. Levin served in the Marines before winding up as an aspiring painter amid New York City's late 50s beatnik heyday. Swept up in the glamour of the beatnik era, as he puts it, Levin co-operated an espresso house that hosted readings by the likes of Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. He worked parties as a rent-a-beatnik, encountering Bob Dylan, another new kid in town, during one such event. At Pushpin Studio, then at the height of its influence upon the design world, he was plucked out of the messenger pool by Milton Glaser, who recommended him to Lee Savage's Elektra Studio, famous for its forward-looking movie trailers and commercials. After leaving Elektra, Levin was recruited before The New Yorker by art director Lee Lorenz in 1974. After taking up motorcycling at the age of 59, Levin celebrated his new hobby with the aforementioned flurry of tattoos. He's given up biking in the interest of personal safety, however, and now resides more or less quietly on Long Island in New York with his wife. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Arnie Levin. Talent, work ethic, and luck. What do you feel is the balance of those over the course of your career? And what was most important, or what was the gestalt of those three?
They were all, I think, seemed to be equal.
Yeah.
On it. I was very lucky, obviously talented. I had a great foundation. I was very lucky in that because I couldn't do anything educationally.
You mean you couldn't learn?
I couldn't learn. I couldn't learn English. I couldn't learn math. It turns out, as I said to one of my cousins, and I was telling her this thing, and I said, I think I'm ADHD. Mm-hmm. And she said, you're ADHD. I'm ADHD. Your mother was. She said the whole fucking family was ADHD. Yeah. And I said, oh, okay, that may explain
it all adds up.
I think I got it. And so, but I happened to hit a wonderful professor because I couldn't go to regular schools. I was flunking out. And I was living in Miami then, or Miami, as we used to say, with my folks, which was a good thing to do. And they moved down there for some odd reason, I think to avoid my stepdad's wife or something. We moved down to Miami.
And Miami was the second Jerusalem for us, so yes. It's okay. For Jews,
Miami
it made sense
I felt perfectly fine in Miami, and they had a trade school there, Miami Technical Senior High School, which was a big the tallest building in Miami at that time, 15 stories up on top, and so I said, okay, I can do this as a trade school. So I had 3 hours of art a day and 3 hours of related topics.
Allegedly,
exactly. Mm-hmm. These guys were just marking time, so they had, because they had a bunch of screwballs and stuff in there. Anyway, he was totally brilliant, and he taught. Like Robert Henry, he didn't teach Robert Henry, but he taught Robert Henry. He was way advanced. Nicolaides came in Nicolaides. We did all our drawing stuff faithfully. I have the book I followed, The Natural Way to Draw, write down, it was 3, and once I had enough hours, if you got a certain amount of hours, I could split the extra hours up with an extra hour of art and an extra hour downstairs in the pharmacy. across
Which sounds
the street
dangerous.
playing the pinball machine.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I was having very good luck with the pinball machines.
Now, were you always the kid who was drawing when you were growing up?
But our family drew.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was a seltzer man. Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's okay.
Was
I'll
a
move that.
seltzer man. And he got paralyzed. And I said my earliest memories is him sitting up in the attic.
Like this?
Painting like this.
Yeah.
And my mother wanted to be a writer. My dad wanted to be a writer. And they split up. She got published once or twice, but she pushed me to art on it, and that was fine. We tried going to Pratt on Saturdays. That was her day off. Mm-hmm. We did that for a while till we decided it was too much traveling to Brooklyn. I mean, we were in Brooklyn, but we had to take trains. Mm-hmm. It was her day off. We did it till my attention span snapped. And I learned the three valuable, or maybe it's two valuable lessons there. Don't copy and don't trace was my memorable tour of Pratt to begin with.
Yeah.
On it. And then I ran into this teacher for high school when I was, I guess, 13. You could get in there if you were 13. And that was it. I mean, we really drew. We were good. And then I went into the service. About a week after I graduated, I was like 17. And you had to have it was either get 7 years of going on weekends and going 2 weeks a year.
Oh, the reserves.
The reserves and stuff. And I joined the reserves. One of my buddies in school was a military type guy.
Yeah.
And he couldn't wait to get into the military. This was his thing. So we joined the reserves together. And I made these, I started a business. And my first business was doing signs for the reserve, silk screen, in a room. This is like about 3/4 of this size.
Yeah.
And silk screening them on the floor, these wooden signs that went on the front. And so, and he had said to me, if you do that, you will get rank when you go in. So you've got a head start. And I didn't think, big deal.
Yeah.
What do I care? But it was real handy.
And you were born in 1938, so this would have been after Korea, but
this
before.
Was all, yeah, this was, there was no action happening anywhere, and so they sent me. I went to Paris Island, and I went to Camp Lejeune. I did all the basic training, and I remember when we were at Paris Island, one of the funniest is this lieutenant was walking around. He had us in a semicircle. He was saying, "What do you want to be?" The guy said, "I want to be an infantry, sir. I want to be an infantry, sir." And he came to me. He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be in photography." Well, he just about lived a brick. Yeah. He went all over the place with that. "What do you mean?" I said, "You have to have, pictures of all this stuff you guys do."
Somebody has to not get shot.
Somebody's got to do the dirty work here. So he never really got that, but I managed to get through basic pretty well. And I was offered at Paris Island, and I don't know why, if I wanted to stay, to teach pistol sidearms.
Yeah, marksmanship or did you show an aptitude for that, or they just?
Well, they gave you one of everything at Paris Island, and so I had just fired the 45, which was a big clunky thing.
And for a guy your size, that's a pretty big gun.
That was a pretty big gun, And so I thought, well, here I joined the Marines, one, to at least get this over with. But B, I certainly didn't want to be in Beaufort, South Carolina for 3 years.
Miami's one thing.
Miami's one thing, and I was a big dancer in Miami. So I was competitions and I had stuff. And Miami was the perfect place.
Yeah.
But anyway, they ended up sending me to Jacksonville for aviation ordnance school. Handling bombs, rockets, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I did that, and when I graduated, I was third in the class. Although I couldn't do algebra, I did. They gave us a week of algebra, which I could never understand.
Yeah.
Before they gave us these tests.
And somehow?
Somehow, I went through everything. I was third in the class. The guy I was with, who joined with me, we had been separated. They put him right in the infantry.
Yeah.
and he went about halfway before he hurt himself going down over a ship or something. Anyway, so when I got finished, I had three choice. I was third choice of where because other people would always take, I forget the big places, Miami or someplace nifty. And they gave me the list, and the list said Mojave. I said, Mojave? That sounds exotic. And so I said, where is it? So he had this big map, and we're looking, and he can't find it.
Yeah.
I said, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Sight unseen, I will take it.
Chances are they won't find me while I'm there.
This is going to be, well, it turned out to be right across the road from Edwards Air Force Base. So they're doing all the rocket stuff, and you always see all the...
Yeah.
Right? And we were across the road. And it was our task as Marine aviation people to service the pilots who would come from El Toro, and the Navy pilots and the Marine pilots. We would run the targets for their bombing and strafing practices. And they were flying then a new plane, the F-8U, not Cutlass. Yeah, I think Cutlass or Corsair. And it was the top, the
newest and
the
best.
Newest of the, and I think the plane, because it was out on our tarmac all the time. And I think the plane itself, because it became the big mainstay of the Korean War, and because it had a hell of a lot of firepower and it had vertical takeoff, they could go like that, make a zoom right up on it. So that was our thing. So we would go out in the middle of the desert, and for strafing targets, we had this nylon webbing we did, and people came down, they shot, and we would go with magic markers and tell them what they would do. And then we would make a ring. We had these rings of tires that were targets, aerial tires. And then we would grade them, and it was like a game of Battleship.
Yeah, see how close they could hit.
We were in little towers up in the middle of the desert and would say, R3, and the other guy would say, I do that. And so I was the ranking person. I was so I had my own crew, of people, and I got along with everybody. That was the good thing. All ethnicity, it was fun. And so I was out there for about almost 3 years, 2.5 years, or maybe 2 years.
So it wasn't like Pfeiffer, who was spending all of his time trying to get thrown out of the military? You pretty much...
No, listen, it was a great... I mean, we went out in the desert. We didn't have to deal with anybody, really. So we were out in the desert, and then I came back and I would hitchhike to L.A. That's why I gave Bob. I'm giving Bob one of my L.A. stories.
Oh, Bob Eckstein, yeah.
Bob Eckstein for his bookstore thing, because I happened to had two. I turned them on to the Gotham, but this was another story in that. That's just the computer or something. I haven't figured out how to turn that noise off until anyway. So.
But you hitchhiked down to L.A.?
Oh yeah, I would hitchhike down every weekend. Not every weekend, but to L.A. and hang out. And the USO there, the Hollywood USO, was awesome.
Yeah,
they had tickets to everything, and so I got to great concerts. I went to Hollywood premieres.
Did your fellow Marines regard you with any sort of weirdness over, you having an interest in the arts and
they called me the tourist.
which is a kind term, I think, all things considered.
It was a kind term, yes. But my, the first couple of days, the first day we went out, I went with the two sergeants that were in charge of us, and they said, Levin, is that a Jewish name? And I said, yeah. He says, we don't have no prejudice here. I said, all right.
Yeah,
I'll bet. You betcha. Well, his parting words to me, though, was to fast forward to another time. I'm on my way to the office there, and I happen to stop, and they post things on the thing, and I see a posting with my name. It was like a few weeks before I was supposed to get out. And then I took the posting like that. I read it, and I go into this guy's office, and he says, Levin, he says, first I'll tell you the good news. I said, what's that? He says, there's only one person who passed any of the tests.
Congratulations.
Right. He said, that means you'll be promoted to sergeant. He says, and we're going to see you get your ass in the brig. And of course, timing was perfect. I said, gee, that really sounds nice. I said, but according to this, I'm leaving in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Getting out of here. So I left, over the transom quickly from it. But they did once try to send me out. I got a thing, and they said, you're getting out a year early. I said, no, I can't be getting out. I went into the sergeant. I says, hey, I'm getting out. Whatever it is. I said, okay. They sent me to Santa Ana. I was there for 2 weeks. They were doing this. I got down to the last two desks, and I'm in this huge Quonset hut, and I'm sitting in the back, and I hear this guy, son of a motherfucking bitch, blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, shit.
They figured it out.
They figured it out. They said, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be. I said, I told them that. So
I just follow orders.
So I went through that. I also did a lot of reading. Well, I did some reading. I had trouble reading, but for some reason, and I think it helped me in my career, even though I didn't know. I went and read every play from 1950 to 1955. They didn't have many books there, but they had all the plays, the Broadway plays. And I think, after that, and considering it was with the New Yorker, I still have a contract, but in all the years that I've been there, they've only changed maybe 3 words, 4 words. Of
your comics?
Of my drawings.
Yeah.
On it. The spelling, we all got a great kick out of.
That's... Yeah.
But as far as the dialogue has gone, it must have kind of wafted in. Yeah.
Somehow. You got the ear?
I got the ear somehow.
Had you ever thought of playwriting at all? Which is a way of getting back to your one of your mentors in New York in the 50s, R.O. Blackman, who, when we had our conversation, really focused on the grand regrets of his life and the areas he wished he'd gone into. And that's sort of, where I'm
Well, I would have, but like I say, because of my and not consistency. It just never occurred to me to, I just went on. And then what happened was I got it to Miami. I hung out in Miami a while. And my big dream was to go to the Art Students League.
In New York.
In New York, yeah. And and the GI Bill gave me that, So, came up to New York. And in typical New York fashion, I didn't know what to do. I landed in New York. I went down to the Village. I'm hanging out on the corner of University Place and 10th Street. Right?
Yeah.
And there's another guy standing over there. And so we start chatting. He says, and we're chatting. He said, I'm going up to party up in this place, up in this building. Well, it turns out that somebody, this kid, I guess a teenager, was there. His parents had gone to Europe and left him this apartment, 10 East, just off of Fifth Avenue and 10th. And it was a party like you see in the movies. Mm-hmm. And the next morning, it was that scene with people half dressed,
sprawled all over,
clothes all over, everything all over the place. And his parents came home. Dumped us out, everybody out onto the street. And so I went and I signed up for the Art Students League, and I shared an apartment with this guy on 91st Street for a while. And he wanted to go to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
Which I'd always heard ads for on Howard Stern and
exactly,
WFAN. Yeah.
And so he sort of did that, and I sort of went my way. And we had the apartment on I think it was 91st Street.
East or west?
Between Central Park, between the park and the next spot.
Yeah.
Great spot. The best. I became too much drunk in there. So I went through that, and then he left. Now, meanwhile, I had found a coffee shop. There was a coffee shop in Manhattan on 9th Avenue between 42nd and 43rd. It was called the Seven Arts Coffee Gallery. And I started going up there because they had photography, they had folk music, they had all this stuff going on there. They had acting, people came in, people from the actor studio sometimes would do a little producer showcase in our play. And the guy who was running the place, name was John Rapinick, a big, burly ex-longshoreman who had gone to, it was in Korea or something. He was in somewhere. Anyway, he was in the service, and he completely freaked out. He got 77 shock treatments. When they let him out, he went to Pratt. Where else
You're fried. You're an artist.
Right, you're an artist. He holed himself up in a place in Jersey City, because he came from Jersey, and he had files and files of clippings, pictures, stuff that he had saved. Mm-hmm. And he got an education from this. And at the as the poetry went on, we had 2 poetry sessions a week. We had a Friday night, which was an open session. Anybody could read. So it was anyone from Ginsberg to, I just came, I wrote a poem, and I'd like to say, it was just like that.
Yeah.
The photographers, we had great photographers. We had Sherman, and we had some painters, Sherman Drexler, Rosalind Drexler. We had a lot of name people. And John became very close with Kerouac. And And eventually he would go off, and he would go off to Big Sur and hang out there. He became one of the characters in the book, Big Sur. He was Popovich, John Popovich. But he could really talk up a storm, and he was a character. So we ran the coffee shop, and we really sort of had, and we shared. Finally, we slept. When I got thrown out of my place, I ended up in the coffee shop, sleeping on the tables. There was about 5 of us, John and maybe 4 itinerants, a couple of people from the actor's studio, one guy was a cab driver and an actor, and everybody had a different story. I remember we slept on the tables at night with sleeping bags, and we had one guy, Milton H. Brown, was an actor, an aspiring actor. I guess he didn't aspire too well, but suddenly in the middle of the night, something's coming, something's good, it better be good, and he'd start doing it because he had an audition with Jerry. It was coming up. Jerome Robbins.
Yeah.
Jerry, I got to see Jerry. So he'd be dancing up and down the aisles in this play. But it was everybody was very good-natured. We had Gordon Parks Jr. Now, the Gordon Parks, that's the photographer. Yeah. It was his son, and he was also Gordon Parks. And he would come up there and play. He would play guitar up there and sing with his girlfriend, and it was a nice group. Then we finally moved to Hoboken. He would find these places, I don't know where.
Essentially squatting.
Well, we had a thing one day. He found me a place to paint, right? And there were several abandoned buildings between 42nd and 43rd Street. And there were abandoned tenements, 5-story like type. And he got me this place to paint in, right? And one day I'm in there, I'm painting, doing my abstract expressionist stuff all over the place. There is a loud noise and a hole in the wall appears. And dust is coming down.
The wrecking ball just.
And there's a guy standing there with a sledgehammer, nice. And 2 other guys, all with helmets. They're in there looking at me. I'm looking at him. He.
Got to find another studio.
So we ran with my paintings down, across, and we stashed them. But he always had, he was going with Marisol for a while. He was dating Marisol.
I don't know who that is.
Marisol is a sculptress and very big in the 70s, the 1970s, or the 1870s.
They seem like a long time ago.
They seemed like a long time. And it was great because we only opened at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And we were one flight up. So you didn't just happen to come in.
Yeah, there's no wandering foot traffic for the coffee shop.
Yeah. And the deal was we served sandwiches, right? It was on our menu, this very sandwiches. Of course, the place was over a deli. I would run down the back stairs. We get an order. I'd run down the back stairs, come up and put it on a plate. We had a great cappuccino machine that I became very facile with. I could make a head on that thing. Almost the whole cup. And that went on for a long time. I quit the Art Students League. I was asked to
leave and never come back?
Well, no, I was asked. I first took Julian Levi, who was a very nice man, and it was filled with dilettantes at that time. And I was doing splash page. I was Jackson Pollock Jr. in that room. So I moved to Mr. Levi, and got Vaclav Vitligil, who was also a painter. And he was very good. And he came to me one day in the John, urinal next to each other, and he said, "You know, I have one piece." He says, "I can't teach you anything."
Yeah.
He said, "What you got to do is go out there and work. And I said, "Okay, I hear you. I understand, And so,
but you weren't taking it as you're unteachable and worthless so much as you know everything I can show you at this point.
No, but he saw that I was going to go my way, and this was, and I took that as a very good thing. And so we were there. We finally got an apartment in Hoboken, so that we could take the ferry right across and go over to Hoboken. And it was in the building. We always called it the on the waterfront building. You've ever seen waterfront? Okay. Yeah. You know the building with the wall where they hang his brother on in his coat like that. That was the side of the building. And the floor we had, it turns out, was the ex-longshoremen's meeting hall. Not like the one they had was down by the water. It was all, but the bar, the Blue Haven bar that was featured, was downstairs from us. They dug out a lot of bullets that matched out of the walls in the basement that matched people, that they had. But Hoboken was great. We went back and forth to Hoboken, and we were on our own schedules. I mean, he made, and I did. And that went on for a number of years. And I moved down into the village. I moved down to, we had an apartment in the village, that's right. 3rd Street between Bowery and 3rd, which was a wonderful place because it was like 3 blocks from the 5 spot, where beers were only like 45 cents. And you could sit there and watch John Coltrane or Monk or anybody all night long. They never hassled you. It was, and John did his thing, and I did my thing. I worked in a little frame shop, making frames, little frames, because it was a little shop, on Grove Street, just off of Bleecker Street, for a long time. And then I got a couple of jobs, a messenger job and another thing. Matter of fact, when then I decided maybe I would go to school. So I signed up to the Art Students League, night class. R.O. Bleckman.
Here you go.
And Charles Slackman. Mm-hmm. So the points converge, right? And, I studied with them, and it was fine. We were, not too far, a few blocks up.
Oh, is that SVA or Art Students League? Okay, yeah, you said Art Students League, but this is SVA.
I left the Art Students League.
Yeah,
but actually, while I was at the Art Students League, I fell in with a bunch of Japanese painters. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize it. And they all knew what they were doing. And the deal was that if you wanted to come to the United States, you had to do something. So if you went to the Art Students League, they didn't take any attendance. There was nothing like that. So they would sign up to go to school at the Art Students League, which was very reasonable. Yeah. There. And so that was their sort of cover for it. And so I hung out with these Japanese painters. And we didn't have much English, but we had a lot of fun. They were nice. They were a family, and
Yeah.
They became a family, more of a family. And they lived across from Rienzi's at that time in the village on Bleecker Street. And so I spent that time, and then I got involved with Herbert Hunke. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No, I don't.
All right. Hunke was a junkie, as the story went on that, and he was the one who got
you started.
Kerouac.
Oh, okay.
Got Kerouac and Ginsberg and all those people. He was with, matter of fact, he handed the gun to William Burroughs when he shot his wife in Mexico by accident. You know, well, I mean, we're all drugged. I mean, you know, who shoots something off a head?
Right.
And Hunke was a long-time junkie, and he had stories. And he was a poet, and when we had the poetry thing going, and we went up and down, and we had the photography, and everything was hunky-dory. And then at a certain point, I guess, we had separate lives, and then one time I was up, one night I decided, I was running the coffee shop late at night. I think I'm going to go to California. So I took the $17 out of the till.
Bus ticket?
Huh?
Bus ticket?
Bus ticket. Yeah. Bus ticket out to Pennsylvania so I could get out of the city and hitchhike up there. And Janine Palmy, who was a great, she was one of the best women's poets of the time. She used to stay with me when we were at the coffee shop. And she eventually went down. This is before I got involved with Hunke and Alan and them. I mean, I knew them up, but I never knew them downtown. Afterwards, I got to know everybody downtown. It was a big mishmash of craziness. Yes, Alan once offered me his iguana. As a matter of fact, he had, and me being kind of shy. So whenever we'd go out to hang out up there, I would play with this iguana. I loved pets.
You didn't have to make conversation.
I didn't have to make conversation. These people had me completely, I was awestruck with
just the talent and
just the talent and what they knew and how they spoke and, And I kept, and at the time I kept saying, I didn't know the term fly on the wall, but it's what I thought.
Yeah.
I said, this is awesome.
It's a good thing the iguana didn't know that.
This is a good thing. But I didn't take the iguana.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not that responsible because I didn't, but that's all I needed to be there. Yeah. He's the guy who killed Alan's iguana, No way. So, and then eventually, I met some people through something else, and through John. We were extras. I don't know where he always got these things strange gigs and things. Yeah. We were extras in a play that was being put on by a group in Connecticut. They were trying to sell the play, and they needed
a cast of
extras, and it took place in a bar, down, in a beatnik bar, and so it was perfect. I just got to sit on the bar stool, and drink, on it. And so I met other people, and we had different things happening, and then. Eventually, I met my first wife. I shouldn't say.
We'll say the less said, the better. That's fine.
Yeah, I have a joke that goes with it.
Nope.
No.
We're better off this way.
Yeah, we're better off this way. Right. And, she just passed away, so she's not going to say anything.
Still.
Still.
Respect.
Yeah.
etc. It was a different time, different life.
Yeah. So let me see.
You were hitchhiking to California.
Oh, then I hitchhiked to California. I made it a couple of days. I somehow... Oh, there were a couple that we knew that from the coffee shop in there. I forget. I know Steve and Mitzi, and they were actors in the.
Were you headed towards L.A. or San Francisco? Or?
Well, they were in L.A. now, and they were pursuing their career, so they let me stay at their place, and they said, "But you got to get a job." I said, "Fine." So I said, "But I have one talent."
At most. Okay.
And that was I had been working for an Oslid company. Now, Oslid is like a blueprint machine. Mm-hmm. We did big panels and murals in sheets and stuff. And the one, I guess you would say, bankable thing I had was being able to run blueprint machine. So we looked up blueprint places, and they drove me over. And I went in, and I got a job overnight on the night shift, right? The night shift in Hollywood was wonderful.
I'll be out there next weekend, so I should keep an eye out.
It's probably gone by now, most of it. But the night shift was just a hoot because it was everybody. There were 3 country and western guitarists, one of whom, and then one guy whose brother was a defrocked Episcopalian minister, and he was running 3 hookers.
I was wondering what you have to do to get defrocked from the Episcopalian Church, but
well, I don't know whether he did it before or after. The hookers were very great because they would come up. It was their thing. No matter what time of the year, they were selling Christmas cards. So, would you buy this box of Christmas cards?
July, sure.
July, sure. It was like, fine, whatever, and that went on for a while, and then. I eventually hitchhiked back. I know I and this guy that I met were sharing an apartment, and he was a guy. He was a little off center, and he always carried a straight razor in his hat, like that.
Yep.
And so it was like you never knew when he was going to. Be called on to use this, but he had this straight razor. So he and a kid who lived, I won't forget his name, Stash Halron. He was a musician. He was very good. And he had worked at this, the night crew, as I said, was a hoot. And Friday nights, we would go to a place where there was this warehouse. And across the street was a liquor store. And so we would go on Friday nights after we got off, which was like at dawn, just before dawn. Mm. And we would take our checks and we would cash it, but we had to buy a bottle of Jim Beam. That was fine. And we would go into this big Quonset hut storehouse thing. And they would play shit-kicking music. Yeah. They had guest stars. They had people. It was that everybody was drinking Jim Beam, and then and then we'd leave in the morning. It was daylight. It looked like the Seventh Seal. Everybody was sort of spread out, trying to focus, because they had finished their little bottle that they had bought over there.
And death was looming. So
yes, and so we drove back to. We did have a precursor of what was that great movie? Was the motorcycle movie? Not the wild one, but the one with
the Peter Fonda
one, right?
I'm blanking. I can't believe I'm blanking on it. We both know the Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson,
right?
Yeah.
And we were driving. Of course, I had long hair going out. I had hair. It was going out all over the place. And we were in Texas, in this bar, and these guys were making comments about the commies with the long hair. This was one of those scenes where we said, I think we should go.
Yeah. Leave this state. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Texas, this is.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we got back, and this guy wanted to hang around with me, but John took him off to the side. I don't know what he said, but I never saw him again. And I hung out there for, on the east side, and worked and got smashed, and just hung out with the people.
But you're making art throughout this, or were you?
Yes, I was trying to make art. I had, and this was, I think I don't know if I told this story to him, wasn't it? I was living in a house behind a house, building behind a building. It was 11th Street and between Avenue A and B.
Yeah.
And you went through this alleyway, and here was a building. It must have been from the Civil War. This lone building, and you felt like you were in a constant Bergman movie going in there. And I shared a bathroom with the Spanish family, because we had two doors on the other side of the thing,
Sure.
And it was great. We got along. They invited me to dinner and stuff, and I used to paint and get smashed and do things, and then that went along for a while, and then I had, I think, another apartment. Oh, I had gotten an apartment. I don't know how we got it. I think John did. That next to Jonas Schimmel's on Bowery. Well, not Bowery, off Bowery. You know where that is, on 2nd Avenue, I guess, where it was. Not 2nd. Wherever Jonas Schimmel's was. And it was a large place. Somebody was going away to Europe or something. Anyway, I don't know how, but it ended up where I ended up with a whole bunch of other people living there who I did not want, who were really into the heavier drugs. I say the heavier. I had the heavier, but they were into very amphetamines and stuff that were wreaking everybody's brain, and they were doing all these tie-dyed things, and it was a mess. And I went. Something happened, and I went. We were up at Irving Rosenthal's. Irving Rosenthal was one time the head of the magazine, literary magazine called The Big Table. Mm-hmm. And he lived on the Lower East Side. And I left with Bonnie Bremser, who was Ray Bremser's wife, who was a poet. And she let me stay over for the night because we were pretty well touched. And then I went back to the apartment, and all these people were in there. And this guy was over there, and he had my jacket or something. I said something to him, and he came out with this large knife, yep. This hunting knife. And I thought to myself, well, I could possibly disarm him. I mean, I was still,
post-military.
Being post-military, I was still had a piece of badass. And then I said, you know what? This is crazy. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I left. I didn't go home. I just went out and lived in the streets for a few months. Mm-hmm. And, bummed money. I got great jobs, I loved the job. I liked being places because it fed you with things. And I would go on the shape-ups. I rented a room, and there was a really flea-bag hotel on 23rd Street. And I had a room in there. I think I was paying $5 a night, but it had a hot plate. So there was a place where you made the shape-ups, which was down on Bowery. You would go just before daylight, about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And they had all of these jobs, that had to be done that they needed hands for.
Right.
And I became immediate favorite because I could put two syllables together down there. But I got this, and we would do all kinds of things, unload trucks, and we would do this, and there were fire things that we went to and cleaned up. And I did that for a while, and I was, but then I think living still over at John's after that. Somehow I just decided that I walked out. Oh, I walked out that scene, yeah. And then I was living at John's, and I decided to go to the Art Students, not the Art Students. SVA at night. And so I had my portfolio, and I went down to meet
Blackman. Yeah.
Right. And of course, I did a complete faux pas with me. I remember I remember the day very, very well for another reason. I was on 3rd Avenue. I went up to see Bob, and Bob showed me he had just done this storyboard or this book for a film. And he showed it to me, and I didn't know Bob's stuff. And there were these little lines, and I thought they were grass, and there was something else, raindrops. I completely misread the whole thing.
If you don't know the visual grammar of Blackman's work, it's,
So I went, but I remember because everybody looked strange. And when I got out, it turns out that was the day Kennedy was shot. People were walking down the street with newspapers. It was a bizarre day. And so I started to go and take night class at Blackman and Slackman. And
what were you studying?
Humorous illustration.
Good teachers.
Yeah. And I used to go, I remember that one day he gave us a thing to do storyboards. And so I took it very seriously. And I did this storyboard, 3 huge panels of foam core board. I don't know how many drawings. And I had this tape recorder. I made a soundtrack of this thing that weighed 40 pounds, right?
Reel-to-reel thing going.
Reel-to-reel. And I got up in front of the class, and I clicked, and I did and I started explaining the music. I did a song and dance, the whole thing. Okay. And it was a big hit. And the next day, meanwhile, they sent me to, I'm sorry, I missed a step here somewhere. I was going to school, and I was taking classes at night with Blackman and Slackman. And so after I did that, the next day, I was working, I got a job, the messenger job, at Pushpin. They sent me in
the animation studio.
An animation studio. And I was doing, delivering for Pushpin to Milton and Seymour and all their stuff. And it was the day after I did the thing in Blackman's class that they said, listen, how would you like to go up and work in an animation studio? Yeah, I think I'd like that.
Itinerant student,
right,
messenger,
right.
Actual job.
Actual job. Yeah. I walk in to Electra Films, which was a big commercial studio now. And Lee Savage, I don't know if that name has come up at all, but Lee Savage was a painter. He was a very good painter and graphics person and filmmaker. And he was at Elektra, and he was handling all the people at Elektra, and I got a job, and I walk in, and Lee has got, this is a classic story, he has advertising age, and on the cover of advertising is a guy putting laundry, Chinese laundry guy, putting it into the, and he takes a grease pencil, and he marks over the whole thing, and he says to me, "This is a long shot." I said, "Okay." And he makes a little thing where the hands are going in and little arrows, right? He says, the little arrows, he says, "This is a truck in." I said, "Yeah." He said, "This is a close-up." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You got that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Go in the back. You'll see a guy, Phil Kimmelman. Tell him to give you a desk. You're an animation director."
Congratulations.
I sat down, they gave me a thing. We're working on OK Chevrolet, you know, do it. I did the spot, came out. And after that, and then eventually, we started to bid against Pablo Ferro. I don't know if you know Pablo. Ferro McGub and Schwartz was the name of the original company.
Yeah.
And Fred McGub, who was one of the ultimate characters of all time, I said, why don't you go up and see, Pharaoh? This is, I'm getting this a little mixed. I'm just trying to see how this worked out. But anyway, I started ending up doing, Pablo was very famous for doing, he did the Thomas Crown Affair, he did the titles, he was very famous for doing trailers also. And I sat down, and they said, Lee came in and said, "We got this thing for storyboard, Unsinkable Molly Brown. We want to do," I said, so they take and Hal Silverman's, we go, and there's a big movie theater, and I don't know whether it was 1600 or whether on Broadway, and the Paramount thing, it was, it's wonderful. This is big thing. It's Yom Kippur Eve. Right. So I and Hal are in there, and I start the second. Hal says, "Listen, I got to go home because this is thing." So I'm in this theater, and I'm watching the Unsinkable Molly Brown on stereoscope on this, and I go back, and I do the storyboard. I do this, and they give us another shot, The Night of the Iguana. And I'm loving this because we get to see all these movies first, the rough cut and everything. And I started doing these film things.
Titles and trailers?
Just the trailers.
Okay.
I think there was one or two titles, but I don't remember which ones they are accurately, but not with him. So then I started stealing work from Pablo. And eventually I would get let off, and I would end up working for Pablo.
Yeah.
And I got Pablo a studio through John, my friend, who got Pablo a wonderful place on 2nd Avenue between 14th and 13th. And that was the place. One day he opened the door and somebody shot him.
Yeah.
It did kill him, but it's crippled him for the rest of his life. So I worked at Pablo's, but then I was the only, he wasn't operating.
Yeah.
So I had done a bunch of trailers and stuff, and I started a freelance. What else do you do? You're by yourself. You call yourself a freelancer. Yes. Hey, I'm a freelancer. And I hooked up one of the animators, that I knew was the very nice man, Jack Hadley, and I started submitting storyboards to Sesame Street, and I started selling immediately. So by then, I was married. That's right, I was married, and Pam and I were living in Forest Hills, and I would do all the film work that I had half a bedroom and half a studio together. So I did that, and then I got involved while I was doing that. Somehow, it was at the beginning of this, I also had an antique store in Brooklyn on Flatbush Avenue, one of the first antique stores over there. And I would sleep. Oh, this was when I was sort of.
It all circles back. I trust you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I got an apartment in the Heights. That's what happened by myself. And I was living in the Heights on Montague Street. And that was after I met this couple that were artists upstairs, Nick and Mary Pasparica. And she was an antique, her and her mother and her sister were award-winning pickers.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say decorators. I wasn't sure if that was it.
They were pickers, and they came from Ohio. So they were Ohio. And we used to go. I used to sleep in the back of the store, and I remember doing the trailer for Pippin, the second trailer, not that first one, but there was a second one, and I did it all by hand myself.
Moviola and everything. Okay.
No, I did it with brush. I decided this dancing figure, Till my ex-wife then hurled a brick through my window.
But that's all in the past.
That was all in the past, as she was wont to do. And so, and Pam was in the business. And I eventually ended up, that's where I met Pam. I was a partner in an animation studio. The four of us. Murray Bruce, who's the director, is still working. Murray Bruce and a guy that was a baron from Holland, a Dutch baron, classy.
Or so he told you.
He was a baron.
For real?
He married the gal as the joke went, in the castle next door. And yes, she had a castle, and they became the classiest guy I've met, And he was a direct lineage of baronry and that. And a couple of times I went to, I took my ex-wife, I got a job I'm in this company that we formed, Fasciné, which I always thought was lame. And I'm sitting on the floor doing doing designer animation, cutting out things, and I'm on the floor. And this guys from Holland came in, and they saw me, and we were this. They went back, and they were working for Tonder Studios, which was a big studio, and did commercials and short films and stuff. And Pim one day said, "How would you like to go to Holland and work in Holland with Tonder Studio?" And we just had a daughter. I guess she was then about 2 or 3. So I packed as my ex-wife and went to Holland. And they got us a beautiful, beautiful apartment. And of course, it had wall-to-wall carpeting, white. You know what's coming next. India ink, right? Went onto the white carpet. So they had to hire a carpet guy. The carpet guy was a riot.
Yeah.
And we got off well, very well. And P.S., it ended up with me staying over with his family in Holland. One day I walked into the, and I still had Megan, but I had to send my ex-wife back. Oh, that was it. We got a job from Tunda or something to go in and do these things. Anyway, I was doing the animation, and I had to we had to forcibly put my ex-wife on the plane. And I stayed, and I went into the thing and bought a motorcycle, 40 gulden. I don't know how much that was.
We'll say cheap.
Cheap.
Yeah.
And I had never ridden a motorcycle, but there's no way to get around in Amsterdam that much, you know. And it was winter. I remember going to a Christmas thing, riding the motorcycle in the snow. The only person on the road. And one of the high points, I would say, this guy there was a church next door, and there was a churchyard from where he lived. And the church would let him, he cleaned rugs and carpets, so he had these big ropes that they would throw.
You need a lot of space to
do it
Yeah.
down there. And it was one of the highlights of my life, I will say. We went down one day, and it froze. It had frozen this large Persian carpet. And we picked it up, and something happened, and we dropped it. And it broke.
That frozen?
It was that frozen. It shattered into pieces. And both of us were at one hand, he said, don't worry, I'll get him another. This is a piece of crap. I'll get him, something else from the flea market. They'll be fine. But we couldn't believe that we broke a carpet. It was,
my God.
So he had put me up, and then my daughter was going during the day to a nunnery, a Dutch nunnery, So she was speaking Dutch. I'd come home, she'd go, I said, speak English, damn it. This is whatever.
This one little house is still American.
Yeah. It's still, Anyway, we made it back to the States together, and somehow I had bought a house in Brooklyn, in Boerum Hill, on Pacific Street. And at that point, things got so wild with her. I had to leave, and then we had custody battles, and it was not good. She had gotten custody, but we were allowed to see her. It was a crazy period with it. And then finally, I got married. I met Pam. Pam was an inker in the place, and I had never, you don't fraternize with inkers. They'll always get you into trouble.
Yeah.
And so she kind of put the moderator on me, and we moved out to Forest Hills, to a little place, and then we came out to visit a friend of ours out in the next town over here somewhere, and he took us to Seacliff. It was a place where they take you, because
show you
there's nothing else happening, and Seacliff is pretty, and we liked it and bought the house.
I drove around a little bit before stopping, so I got to see a little of the allure.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, it's well, the nice thing about Seacliff is that you don't have to go through it to get any place.
Yeah. There's a great essay about Long Island overall by the writer Ron Rosenbaum about how, unlike New Jersey, you don't go through Long Island to get somewhere else. This is the terminal point of America. There's no, I'm here so I can go on somewhere else. If you come out here, this is where you're going.
This is it.
Yeah. It's a neat concept.
And by that time, and I think by then I was working at, like I told you, then I was working at the studio at the. I was going to school. Let's see, was I going to school? I know we did jobs in the house, in the apartment. There, she remained in the business, and I stayed doing with the Spartan doing Sesame Street Electric Company.
But at the same time, under contract with the New Yorker as a cartoonist.
No, I hadn't even. I
wasn't sure when that what the timing was for when you started with that.
This was
okay. This was all preceding that.
This was preceding that.
So what got you drawing cartoons?
Well, what happened was that the animation business.
Yeah. Dried up.
They cut back on. I was doing Sesame Street and the Electric Company and stuff, which was wonderful because they just. I mean, to do a 37.5 seconds piece. I mean, you just did it till it ended, and pleasantly, you know. There was always the temptation to add, and you got paid by not the footage you did. There was always the temptation to add a scene here.
Yeah, go long for more.
Go long. Yeah. Maybe we ought to put a couple of more shots. But I worked for them for a long time, and then when we moved out here, that had been pretty well going down, and I started teaching. I started teaching at SBA, humorous illustration. I took over Bob's class.
Yeah.
And I did that for a number of years, and you know, doing freelance animation stuff, illustrating a couple of children's books, and that's where we've been since then. We've been here. I think I have one client left.
For animation?
For animation. No, actually for illustration on it. The animation business went pretty rapidly. All the big studios took over.
That's what I assumed. There wasn't a lot of opportunity.
There wasn't a lot of opportunity. And the producers were really trying to really put the independents out of business.
Sure.
You know. So, because it was with the union. I loved the union. That was fun. Yeah.
Now, how did that work feed into the cartooning?
Okay.
You know, just as far as what you'd learned from one field, you know, applying into another.
All right. So that business went downhill. Mm-hmm. Then, so where did I go for guidance? Bob.
Yeah. Blackman, having seen the animation world fall apart,
and I went to Bob, and Bob said, "Why don't you do some stuff for the New Yorker?"
Which you've been reading since you were a kid.
Which I've been reading, and not only have I been reading, but I figured it out. This was all my mother's doing.
A sort of time delay career for you?
No, she had, you know, when she worked, she worked at 30 Rock, and she would go in on weekends to do the tax forms, and they would sit me in a little room off in a corner, and they would give me a yellow pad and a pencil, and I was in one of these wonderful little niches in the middle of 30 Rock. That went and it was all angles and stuff. Yeah. And I would sit there, and when we left, my reward, and I'm sure this was my mother's doing because I knew I wouldn't come up with a plot like this. There used to be something called a 19-cent bookstore, which turned into Tad's Steakhouse. Mm-hmm. But the 19-cent bookstore, everything was 19 cents. So I was allowed to have a certain amount of dollars worth of New Yorkers. which I would pick out. I don't know why. I can't remember. That's all blank.
It's always the cartoons.
That was probably, you know. So when he said you're going to be a cartoonist, I did. I did have one fling in cartooning. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, a good story. I had broken. I had a car accident. This was in Florida. This goes back, and I was with these musicians, and they had brought up this gal, and would I drive her home? And I drove her home, and on the way back, I was so out of it. I was totally out of it. One thing I remember was I was about from here to where that lamp thing is, where this light is, and I was sitting, and I was heading right for it, and I couldn't move. And wham! I went right into it. Mm-hmm. So I dislocated both shoulders. I had a pin in my hip and so forth. And I was sitting at home, and one day I said, I remember she had Writer's Digest. I remember seeing in Writer's Digest, how to do cartoons, how to send in a batch of cartoons. Mm-hmm. So we found that issue. It said put in like 20 something. And I sat with my, hips and my shoulders were like this. And I got a bamboo pen. For some reason, I wanted a bamboo pen. And some typewriter paper, and I did 40 cartoons. I sent half of them to Playboy. Forgot about it. In the interim, I destroyed a couple of more cars on the way to New York and hitchhiked in a wheelchair, because that was after the accident. Yeah. Hitchhiked in a wheelchair to New York. And I remember my best ride was, I got these Okies or rednecks, and they were visiting relatives, and they had a case of Jim Beam in the back. So if I wouldn't mind, we would stop. We would go into the back, and we would have these barbecues, and everybody would get wiped out, and we would go in there, and I said, these guys are insane. And I had just enough money. I waited till we got close enough to New York, and I said, I think I better get going here. Yeah. This is fun, guys.
Got out in time, and
I got out in time. I ended up in the city, and I was still. What happened was my car, I left with a Hillman. I had a '56 Hillman convertible, which was nice. I got part, and the engine froze. So I got out, and I started to hitchhike with my crutches, or the wheelchair. I forget what, but I had one of them, and they went around their things, and I went back up to the city. I think I'm looping here.
You'd sent in the gags to Playboy.
Then, right.
Yeah.
And then while I was, living, I forget where, but, down in the village. We had the apartment on 3rd Street. Okay. I was living there, and I get this thing from my mother. And it's a brown envelope. We'd like to buy 3 of your cartoons.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I said, great. And so I did these, and with the Japanese, the bamboo pen, and worked out this style, because I didn't have a style. It was whatever we will see. And I sent them half. And so they wanted to buy a couple. And then, so I sent that to them. Then I waited, and I waited, and I waited. I waited, nothing happened. Then we finally got a check. The whole process took about 6 months.
Right.
And I said, this is a really slow business. You know, $90 I made out of this over a period of 6 months.
Right.
I said this was a slow-moving business. So I got out of cartoons.
Gotcha.
At that point.
Yeah.
Right?
But came back in once animation began to...
Well, after the animation, who was it? Oh, Bob. Well, Bob sent me to the New Yorker. Did I say that?
You'd said he told you should go into the New Yorker.
And he got on the phone and said, I had this guy. And I went up and saw Lee Lorenz. Mm-hmm. And Lee said, okay, we'd like this. We'd like 3 of your ideas. Mm-hmm. That was where the 3 came in. And I thought, how do I do a finish with the New Yorker? This is the New Yorker. Completely choked. Yeah. Nothing. I would go in there week after week with a new style. With these 3 drawings. Yeah. I couldn't sell these drawings to Lee. I said, oh. And finally I sold the covers I was going for. I sent in some covers. And that's what they called me in. And I couldn't do a finish on the cover. So I started to do black and whites. Yeah. And
what was the issue with not being able to finish? Just no practice in terms of what their...
Yeah, I mean, it was
style?
Just like, I mean, Lee was great. I mean, you do what you do. And, of course, this was just a rough.
Yeah, the cartooning.
And then I thought, what do I do as a finale for this? This is the New Yorker. This is, turn in a rough to the New Yorker. And then I started selling. And then I started to really sell.
How did your style evolve in that process? Because your style is very different than anyone. We'll be honest here. How did you evolve into that?
Being in the antique business, we would go to these big flea markets. Mm-hmm. And I found one here at Route 110, and he sold paper. I mean, 14 by 17, 18 by 24. And he had stacks of it, just stacks. And it seems he was a printer, and these were left over. Mm-hmm. So I would go to the shopping cart, I'd leave, literally. Yeah. I mean, we had this thing, it was packed right to the top to go. So I had all the paper I wanted to draw. And it was never a matter of if I didn't like it, I threw it away. So I didn't like it, I threw it away. So I started to turn in drawings. And they started to buy. And I said, all right, I gotta, up my, thing here, I discovered I had a head on my shoulders, mm-hmm. and so I just kept sending in, and Lee, and then one day Lee said to me, I'd like you to come into the office. That's behind the closed doors.
Not the come in, have a seat conversation that means...
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said to me, would like to offer you a contract, a first look contract. I said, what does that mean? Well, you get, you're not going to get rich, he said, being a cartoonist. Yeah. He said, it's a good way to make some extra money, I don't think he put it like that, but he said this is a way to make a living, And so I said, they're buying, I'm selling. You got to go with the hot hand here, So I kept doing it, and they kept buying, And it was 3 years before I finally sold a cover. And then, then after that, so I've done maybe 18 or so covers. Mm-hmm. Because it was a nice break from doing just the cartoons. The cover was a different
story. How did that process differ? What's it like making one versus the other, I guess?
Well, I really liked graphics, and I had a pretty good graphic background doing the animation and stuff. And so I literally developed a style to
convey that.
And I had always liked, I was brought up with that in high school, not that high school, Bauhaus and graphics, and I was brought up with good art.
Yeah.
With it.
Who were your influences like that in terms of cartooning and in terms of real illustration? What were the artists who really moved you?
Well, the one that I loved, and it turns out that even before I knew his name, even before I was interested, when I was younger, there was a children's book about Ulysses, and I loved it. It had wit, it had style, and it was illustrated by Andre Francois. And I said, okay. Yeah. When did I really turn the screw? I'm walking down 8th Avenue. Not 8th Avenue. I'm walking down 6th Avenue, and I'm going across 8th Street. And it was the St. Mark's Bookstore, I think it was called, or Barnes and Noble. It was not the big Barnes and Noble. It was a couple of doors in. And then it was early in the morning or something, and on the way, and no one was around. I'm looking in the window, and there's two books. The Naked Sailor, the Tattooed Sailor, and the Naked Something or other, by Francois. Andre Francois. And I didn't realize the connection that I had thought about it before. Then that's where I got the idea, now that you mention it, for the wooden pen. But I was also, I spent time, there was an art store down in Sheridan Square, just above Sheridan Square. Petria's art store. And the woman who ran it was purportedly the mistress of Kuniyoshi.
Yeah.
Right? And then later, she was the mistress of George Grosz. The story was that he was on his way back to marry her when he died from Europe. Anyway, I hung around there, and like I say, I traversed back and forth. So when I that sort of set my tone. It was Francois.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know the two were connected until years later. I put two and two together very slow with math.
Again, no algebra for you.
No algebra for me, So, although the one time I did great with algebra was when I was in the service. I came out third in the class with no...
Go figure. You intuited somehow.
I was not going to try it again. No way.
And when it comes to humor, because the cartooning is one thing visually, but the ability to structure a joke and the verbal wit.
I think when I got
it all
out
those
of the
plays
service,
that you were reading?
I remember I listened a lot to Lenny Bruce. And then when I was in the city, of course, I would go to see him, and I would see him in Miami, which would be in those nightclubs. But I remember the last time I saw him was at Village Vanguard. The two of us were equally stoned. He was unintelligible. I was unintelligible.
Made it funnier that way?
It made it funnier that way. And I realized, I was sitting on that stool and I'm swaying and he's swaying. And I'm thinking, oh, God. This is... Anyway, I was a big Lenny Bruce fan. And then like I say, I don't do much reading, but probably I think that the book that galvanized my intellectual was Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, this is what makes sense. This is, how you take, a thing and make a thing out of it like that.
There's a lot of humor embedded in it that, people come to the book with too much solemnity or something, but they don't quite get that it's actually funny as shit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was great. So, between that and really the desire to do good artwork, even though it was a cartoon. Mm-hmm. And I went and started getting in the art store little notebooks. And then I got bigger notebooks.
Yeah.
With it. And of course, it was great. I was going to, we had all these jazz places were around and everything was like, mm-hmm. And I drew in the clubs and I drew around and I drew wherever I was. I started to, but I went the next day after seeing the
Francois books. Yeah.
I started a regimen of going up to the McDonald Library and looking at art books, just picture books. I would have a stack of them, and I would spend hours. And didn't do anything. Didn't even just looking, and there were one or two things that hit on me, and I sort of incorporated in some of the drawings I did in the books. But that's really how I just...
Was there a moment that you felt your style had crystallized? Not that it was static, but that you would hit on the way you wanted to draw? Do you remember a point of this is who I am now. This is how I draw?
Yes. When I started to fill up little notebooks.
That was it? Okay.
That was it. I said, okay. And who else? The other kid that was there with me at the same time was Bill Steig's son, Jeremy Steig. But then he was doing his flute. He was doing his musical stuff. Mm-hmm. He was a really good musician.
Yeah.
And so, then I filled up all these notebooks. And
that's where you found yourself.
And that's where I found myself on it, And that's where I think somewhere along that line was when I started to go up to the School of Visual Arts and try to maybe do something with, when, of course, I had Blackman and Slackman.
Yeah.
There.
What did you learn from teaching years later, teaching humorous illustration? Did that process of teaching at all help you figure out certain things of what you were practicing, or had you already worked it out and that's why you were able to teach?
Well, I was able to teach because I had a good eye. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew it, and I had, this high school class. I mean, it was
It really
genuine.
Was that important?
And it was absolutely, because Friday was the day that you were allowed to bring in a piece, but it had to show at least a minimum of 4 hours work. And then it went up on the one piece, and everybody criticized it. Mm-hmm. Once you get over that hump, of being
you
criticized,
can take anything.
You can take anything, and so I didn't have a fear of the arts, so to speak. And I definitely wanted to, but I had no idea. The New Yorker was just, Bob said, go take your stuff up there and take a look. And I thought, hey.
He says so. He's an authority.
He says so. Well, but I did sell the 3 drawings, as I said, to Playboy. Mm-hmm. And of course, after I figured out the process, 85, 80,
you said
85, 90, and figured out it was 6 months before I got paid.
Yeah.
that wasn't my, But of course, going into the animation then made it. They took me, like I said, they took me from being the messenger. They came in and just
gave you a career in this.
Gave me a
space.
career, and I said, "Fine. I mean, I loved going to the music, to the. I can remember, and aside from having the money come in from doing it, which was a novelty,
People will pay me for art. That's Now, how do you? We talked about influences on you. When you see, have you met cartoonists and illustrators who've cited you as an influence on them?
Occasionally.
And what's that feel like? Do you either see it or you consider, no, you're just ripping off my stuff, or do you see it as, wow, okay, I see where you integrated?
Well, there's a funny story that goes with this. With that question. There was a guy who was ripping off Bob Blackman.
Yeah. He alludes to that in our conversation, but yeah.
Okay. There was one guy that was really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, I'm teaching the humorous illustration class, and I get him.
Yeah.
He's in my class, and he does this stuff, and I look, and, and by then I had, in dealing with Bob's work, I had done animation projects and stuff, so I was really familiar with his work. And this guy really had it down pat. And I said, has Bob Blackman ever seen this? I said, you're the guy. And I said, yes.
He's just slinking lower and lower in the sea.
No, he was a guy. He was in his 50s then, which seemed old. And he was in the advertising business. And somebody had once asked him, because Bob always charged top dollar.
Yeah.
And he got it. And so what happened was somebody asked him to do.
Can you knock this off for me and do it cheap?
Because Bob was
cost too
doing
much.
it.
Yeah.
And he did. And so one day, I don't know, maybe a year or two later, I'm walking down the street and I see one of my drawings in a window.
And I
go over it. Yep.
I don't remember drawing that.
And I look at the signature, and it's this guy. I said, good, I got him off of Bob. And now
it's like a little vampire just going from artist to artist. But I guess it's flattering that, somebody thinks your style is worth,
It was.
I think it was Matt Groening, the Simpsons guy, who said copyright infringement is the sincerest form of flattery. Back when everybody was knocking off Simpsons T-shirts and such. But, but yeah, no. I guess it means something that your style's distinct enough that someone would consider it
Right, and I had never looked at my style to do anything.
Yeah.
I sort of developed it as workable,
to serve the purpose of.
It serves the purpose, and it was very good, and that saved me from wandering all over the place in my work. I was able to focus and go right to.
Yeah. Yeah. How does a gag start for you?
I would get newspapers, and I would get on the night before.
Yeah.
The night before Tuesday, which was probably a Monday, in most cases, and I would get magazines and newspapers, and I would just turn the pages, look at pictures, look at this, look at that, and don't put it down and go through another one and turn. Oh, I got an idea, and it really, and that worked for me for a long, long time. But what was important was Lee Lorenz now, because Lee was a really good art director, and he didn't point, tell you what to do. He kind of pointed you a little bit in a direction, and that was all. But he was he's such an erudite, intelligent person that he could pick up on stuff.
What was there and what needed to be. Okay.
With it. And so I finally got to a point, I never thought I would, because I would come in like with 40 drawings. His eyes would glaze over. I mean, I wouldn't stop. I was
like,
on the
Arnie,
gravy train.
5, 6, 7, that's all we need.
That's all, and there were times, I sold multiple drawings and a cover, and and I try to spread once in a while as a thing, and it just seemed to, and it was a nice thing. He never said anything, but I knew. I knew there were times when I could get an idea up to a point, and I couldn't get I couldn't jump that gap. In there,
and submitting it would lead to.
So I would say, all right, let me give it to him this way. Let's see where we go with it. And sometimes he would say something. This is, this reminds me of a thing.
This would be funny if you had this.
Yeah. And so, I picked up on that. And of course, I had also was locked into many comedians. Mm-hmm. So, and that was very big at the time. So I just had a sort of a sense with it. And that's why I said my mother got me into this.
Did she ever get to see your work in the New Yorker?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Yeah, she got to see it. And she made me think of another story. She said, I was once in a play, and this I was inside a box.
In a play.
In a play.
Okay.
And it had crepe paper around it, and at a certain moment, I would surprise the audience by leaping out of this box.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I was so busy fiddling around with things that I was.
Mr. Q?
I was knocking the crepe paper out of the thing. So it was not quite a surprise when I leapt out of the box like this, and everybody knew there was somebody in the box because it was rolling. Yeah. So I got a stage presence.
But your mom, you were saying, she got to appreciate what you.
Oh yes,
what you had done.
Yes, she got fortunately a number of years, good. and she, because she wanted to be a writer, and my dad wanted to be a writer,
and seeing you succeed, not just commercially in the animation world, but as a New Yorker contributor, actually.
That really, and I said it was something with all those covers that books that we took.
She was setting a bomb way back.
She never said a thing to me. She just left them with me.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the New Yorker cartoonists I've talked to tend to know each other. They tend to hang out. Bob Eckstein tells stories of the Chinatown lunches and all this that they do. Did that sense of camaraderie with the other cartoonists play out for you?
It's a different group.
Yeah.
I was in, I said the group. And here's the point. We were at a lunch, and I realized the difference.
How so?
We were at one of our lunches at that restaurant on 40-something Street, wherever we go. And there was a group, and I was sitting with, I think, George Booth and Dana Fraden, and, the regulars, Bob Weber. And there were some younger cartoonists down at the end. And they said, I heard them saying, one of them said, and I think it might have been Liza. I know Liza was in the group. She said, well, we got to do something. How can we make money out of this? And this had never occurred to me. How do we make money out of this? This is not, And so I changed my attitude thinking. But the fact that I never thought, I felt, here money was coming like, wow, this is great. But I said, I have an intent, to keep a certain quality of our stuff. And I knew that I could take a chance on something and Lee would recognize it, and if it would recognize. So I felt on very solid ground with it.
Do you feel he had that sort of relationship with many of the other cartoonists, or do you think it was that you guys had a particular connection?
No, this had to do with him being the art director.
Yeah, I just mean, did that gestalt, the way you guys worked together, did you see other cartoonists working as smoothly with him, or was it just something where, again,
I think that's the way he...
Oh, good, okay.
I felt that he just had a very easygoing way with him, and very, open. I know the first couple of times I went up to New York, I was so revved about, going in there. I got there early, and I would sit in the hallways in front of his door. He would come in at 10, and I would be in there like 8:30, sitting on the floor until they finally said, "You can't sit on the floor here. I can't." Nobody, they don't mind. No, you really don't sit on. Yeah. With it. And then I ran into. I used to work for Swift Messenger Service, which is a job I loved. And it was Midtown, because I was literally a fly on the wall. And then as I started to get my illustrations sold and stuff, and I realized the value, because I knew every secretary.
Yeah, and you could actually make sure, can you make sure you pass this through? And,
I told him it was C-Bar one time, a couple of years ago. And I told him a story that had happened 30 years before that. Mm-hmm. And I'd say to him, I would have these envelopes, I would go on the bus, and I would take everything out and put them on the side and
actually look at
it's over, nothing's going to happen.
So you're checking out everybody's art as a messenger?
I would check everybody. Well, it was Milton and Seymour, and it was the top of the line artists there. And to see their originals, and to see, and then the other great thing, the two things that I learned that saved me from stuff. One of them, I learned the value of research.
How so?
Because they would send us, or me, then, I would go up to the picture gallery in the New York Library, and pick out pictures for them. Mm-hmm. Like things they want to scrap that they needed to draw. And I watched how they worked, and they didn't copy anything, but they got some kind of thing out of it, and I guess they had, you have to have that for accuracy anyway, but it did something, and so I that's been my process of looking, and not trying to reach, but just waiting till it was close enough to, to get at. And even if it was like far, I'd say, "Oh, this is good. This is," and I would take it in and show it to Lee, and like that. I said, "No, this is going to work." I'd come in and
rework
6 months later, I'd bring it back again. So, and one day, I would find a key to it. I'd keep looking at it, and I could say, "What?" And I would do this little thing.
Yeah.
Well, it would work. So there was my process went that, anything could set me off. Mm-hmm. And I would follow it down the rabbit hole and see where I went. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But, it always, something happened with it. So, and I like to work, and it was that was the nice thing about work at the New Yorker. It was all open. I mean, I think one of the most brilliant cartoons that I didn't do, but that George Booth did.
Yeah.
And I said, this really sums up a point of brilliance. It's the one where the guitar string snaps and the dog that looked like a pit bull dog is like, wah, like that.
The frenetic activity.
And, And I thought, how wonderful. He has made a cartoon out of the moment of a broken string. He has taken this sound and
embodied it.
Taken it to someplace else. And so that's why, I always was very serendipitous. I said, I want to see this. I'd buy the Daily News. I'd buy the Times. I'd buy some other one that I could hardly read. It had a lot of tiny type. And I would just go through.
Yeah.
And Time magazine. And sooner or later, something popped out of the woodwork.
Is there a panel you're proudest of? And I know it's weird for gag cartoonists because there's such a volume of work. Like when I asked Sam Gross, it was, I know what sold the most, but,
Was there a pen?
Was there a panel? Was there a gag that you did that's your sort of,
Yes.
all-time fave?
There's one now that I get reprints on. One or two that have lasted the test of time.
Are they your favorites, though? Or do you have a favorite of your own?
They are a couple of my favorites. I got a number of favorites.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I like.
Yeah. That's the thing with you guys. It's so much about volume that it's tough to have. This is the one great comic that I have done where,
Well, this one, and I don't know why it has, but it has caught on.
I think The Dog Wants to Go Out is still my...
That's the one.
That's it. I mean, with Sam, the Frog's Legs one is the thing he'll always be remembered for.
Yes, that's.
But yes, the well-dressed dog in a top hat and cane and cloak. Yeah, I think he wants to go out.
Yeah, and I'm talking trying to work out some stuff with maybe. Do you know what's his name? Oh. It'll come back again. He's on the internet a lot. He's kind of a humorist, and he's one of the funniest guys that I've met. All right, I'll come back.
Yeah. Anyone who spends 2 hours talking to me, their brains just glaze over after a while.
Yes,
so I will let you go. What I'm astonished is we've done 2 hours of conversation and haven't really talked about motorcycles or your extensive tattoos. But I figure we're going to save that for the next time we get together, right?
I mean, that's a whole, it really didn't have anything to do with...
That's all part of who you are, though. So.
Yeah, it sort of evolved with it. Actually, one of the reasons, I remember the motorcycle thing, when the New Yorker changed, when it changed over the...
From Sean to Gottlieb, Gottlieb to Tina Brown, to Remnick.
I guess it was Tina Brown.
That would have been the early 90s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That kind of changed the atmosphere for me on it. Not that she did anything or she didn't do anything, but there was just not the sense of, I didn't have the sense because I understood a lot of what I do is echoed through the same channel that, Lee and the other cartoonists at the time, and even probably Mr. Sean, everybody sort of understood a certain rhythm.
Yeah.
With it.
And for some of them, there's just... Some people have a different taste. I think Glenn Baxter, when I recorded with him, the British artist and cartoonist, he had said when Tina Brown came in, that was it for me. She just did not find my stuff funny. And so they never bought another piece of mine, and that was it. So sometimes, just changes of regime can cause...
Can do it. Well, she brought him in, Was it she who brought Baxter?
I thought he told me that he was there under Gottlieb and that Tina Brown didn't like his stuff. He was there, but I'm not 100%. But I think that was the case. So he was there prior to Tina Brown, and when she came in, he was done apparently. So, but I'm not sure. I might be misremembering. So, but but changes like that culturally, just one person's taste can be.
Well, that was a big thing. Tina seemed to be. That wasn't my problem, really. And Lee was great.
Yeah. But anyway.
Can't say enough about him.
But we'll do another one of these. We'll talk about your extensive tattoos and motorcycle. Until then, Arnie, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on.
And that was Arnie Levin. As I said, an epic singular life. There's no website for him, but he is on Facebook if you want to look him up. You should also go to newyorker.com and search his name because you'll find a ton of great cartoons and illustrations of his there. But you should also go to art.com, and it's just A-R-T, and search for his work. And again, his name is spelled A-R-N-I-E-L-E-V-I-N. And at art.com, they've got more than 500 of his illustrations there, including the great cartoon I mentioned during our episode. That's the one where the dog is standing in the living room wearing a suit, top hat, and cloak and holding a cane, while the wife says to the husband, "Howard, I think the dog wants to go out," all in that amazing drawing style of his. This one was recorded at Arnie's home in Seacliff, New York, and there's maybe $20 in tolls, a couple of bucks for a cold brew coffee on the way home. Lots of traffic both ways, but that's what I do for you guys. If you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, and equipment, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. Make a one-time or recurring donation. A special thanks go out to Kevin Katila, John Wendler, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Wallace Wilde Manozzi, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Garrett Zecker, Craig P. Steffen, and Ron Slate for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David's got a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David, and you can find out more and support that at facebook.com/DavidandDavidMusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with the award-winning illustrator Joe Chardiello. And I'll be in Los Angeles at that point, but I should be able to post from the hotel while I'm there. We'll see. Until next time, you can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store or at soundcloud.com/VMSpod. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, on Facebook at facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and at YouTube by searching out Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. It'll help us build a bigger audience. Till next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.